Hi, my name is Laura Postma, and for my Vocation and Calling presentation, I chose an article entitled What Does It Mean to Integrate Our Faith and Work? It's by Amy Sherman. I chose this topic because it's something that I'm really interested in. In high school, I had a lot of friends that wanted to be pastors or missionaries, and I was more interested in business, in the corporate world, and really was trying to figure out, is there a way that I can still glorify God, even though I'm not in a strictly Christian role. And so that's something I've always been thinking about, and so this article was pretty attractive to me. We're going to break this down into 3 different parts, and we're going to also find some practical ways that we can adopt these strategies, and then explore this perspective from other works as well. So the first thing that they mentioned in this article is to focus more on what kind of employee you want to be. So the idea here is that your occupation is not restrictive. So no matter what occupation you're in, you can still bring glory to God by being a good worker and a glorifying worker. So whether you are kind, hardworking, patient, ethical, you can practice these characteristics in whatever role that you are in, and this really comes into another resource, Resolving Everyday Conflict. This is by Ken Sandy and Kevin Johnson, and their idea here is that even if you're not working for a Christian organization, you can still bring in Christian practices such as resolving conflict well. So they believe that conflict is not only good for growth, but it's a really good reconciliation strategy. And this is truly reflective of God's character. So whether you're in a Christian environment or not, you can still bring in these Christian characteristics into the workplace to bring glory to Him. The next strategy is practicing the habits of Jesus. So Sherman calls this seeing, crossing, and confronting. So Jesus paid attention to his surroundings and he looked out for any injustice. Secondly, he crossed boundaries. He ate with sinners, and he really sought relations across divides that other people did not. That's crossing. And thirdly, he confronted the injustice that he saw. He confronted it, and this is something that we can adopt as well. If we see within our own workplace some injustice, we are called to set this right. And this may come from crossing that divide and asking for stories from people that are different from you. Maybe you don't feel like the workplace is unjust, but they do. And through hearing that story, we can really make the organization a better place. So some examples of this is just eating with people who are different than you. Another great way to do this is look at your company values and really measure, are we sticking to these? This links in well with the Handbook to Leadership. This is by Ken Boa. And in this book, he really stresses the importance of values and how this can be godly. He says that values are foundational to us. And they ground us. So it's important to name these, whether they're personal, professional, organizational, and really stand firmly in them. So that's just another thought of the importance of looking for what world, what organization we want to be living in, and confronting, calling out our institution or our supervisors if we're doing something differently. Now, the last strategy is not just to pay attention to how you're coming across, but what you are actually doing in your occupation. So Sherman asks us to think about what God and His kingdom values and how can we contribute to that. So some ideas: justice, we talked about that a lot, peace, kindness, inclusion. What does this look like to offer inclusion in the classroom as a teacher? Or what does it mean to practice ethical practices as a finance man, or an engineer to practice safety over the idea of cost? I'd really encourage you to think about whatever profession you're in, how can you incorporate some vocational stewardship and some characteristics of God's kingdom into the work that you're doing. The last thing I want to leave us on is something from the Gift of Being Yourself by David Benner. He reminds us that God made us unique, and he meets us in our uniqueness. So if your occupation looks different than your neighbors, or if your practices of these techniques looks different from your neighbors, that's okay. As long as you are focusing on glorifying God through what comes naturally to you, that is really all that matters. So there you have it, folks. Focus on what kind of employee you want to be, practice the habits of Jesus, and pay attention to what you're doing and how you're doing it. Thanks.